Hey everybody, it's Sean Bewley the Kid. I'm standing here at Lee Williams High School in Kingman, Arizona. Now, why am I at a high school? Well, something very interesting was here a long time ago. And over here on this concrete bench is a plaque that marks the spot where this was. Now, if you look behind me, there's a bunch of modern buildings. And then over in this area, you've got a turnaround parking lot. And then in the distance there, behind me is a football field. Now, what was here? Well, this just happened to be the spot of the Kingman Pioneer Cemetery. This was a cemetery from 1881 to 1920. And then after 1920, they needed the land, and so they needed to move the cemetery. So they started relocating all of the bodies. Now, the way they did that was they charged a fee to the family members to move their loved one over to the other cemetery. The problem was there were still a lot of unmarked graves because this was stuff from the 1800s, back when Kingman was a Wild West railroad town. So there's a lot of unmarked graves. There was even some graves that were unclaimed. Nobody came forward to pay the moving fee, or maybe there were no living relatives or what have you, but there were dozens of bodies left behind here. So in 1944, this location as a cemetery was officially abandoned. It ended up being a vacant lot. And then in 1948, just 4 years later, they built Kingman Junior High School on the other side of this building. And then in 1957, they built the high school on this lot. So for a while, it was a junior high on the other side right there, high school over here. And then in 2009, which was really only 16 years ago, they dozed this. They revamped this whole area to be just the high school. So instead of it being a junior high and high school, this is now the second high school, because the big Kingman High School is a few miles away from here. So this is one of the other high schools. In 2009, they took dozers through here and were putting in this parking lot. And what's kind of interesting is when it was dirt, the kids were coming out for recess and they're walking around here and they're kicking up human bones. Now, we don't know how many graves were left here, but I can pretty much assure you they didn't get all the human bones out of here even to this day. In fact, I really, truly believe that I'm still standing in a parking lot that is covering up human remains. And another interesting thing that happens here is the students and faculty claim that this Kingman High School is haunted. They're seeing ghosts, apparitions, hearing voices, seeing figures at the end of the hall when the school is supposedly closed. They're saying a lot's going on in this building. Now, I don't know what to believe, but it probably doesn't help that there's a former cemetery right here. It's basically a burial ground for pioneers of the Wild West.
Now, I have to admit to you guys that this video is kind of taking a turn. When I was standing at the high school, I started wondering about something and started doing some research. And you might think that the story at Lee Williams High School is pretty rare, but it turns out it's not. All across the country, all throughout time, our so-called progress has been marching over the top of final resting places everywhere. Cemeteries, burial grounds, and even unmarked graves don't always remain untouched. Sometimes they're carefully moved, and other times they're just paved right over or built upon, and thus forgotten. You might be walking through a shopping center, dropping your kids off at school, or at a hotel, and you don't even realize you're standing in a location where people were once laid to rest. In the 1990s, workers in Manhattan unearthed hundreds of graves from what was once an African burial ground, buried beneath the streets of lower New York. But in the 1700s, they paved right over it, and it took centuries and a backhoe to even remember it was there. In San Diego, they found graves underneath a Walmart. Can anyone say haunting on aisle 13? Expansion after expansion, lot after lot. Human remains are quietly and often accidentally found. As we build outward and upward, we rarely look down. And sometimes it's not just construction that disturbs the dead. Nature has a way of exposing what is buried and has been forgotten. Let me show you something. This is just 2 miles from my house. Back in 2011, we had rain in northern Arizona like we hadn't seen in more than 100 years. It tore into this peaceful valley, carving this ravine deep into what used to be solid ground. And right here, in the dirt wall, a human skull. No cemetery markers, no clues, just bone, as if the earth itself remembered what we forgot. It makes you wonder how many places hold remains like this, quiet, hidden, until water or time or progress reveals them. It's enough to make you pause. Your house, your neighborhood, your city, who else is lying just below the surface? Not every grave is marked, and not every grave has a headstone, and not every grave remains at rest. Maybe we build more than buildings on top of graves. Maybe we build a kind of cultural amnesia, convincing ourselves that the past is boxed, buried, and done with. So the next time you hear a creak in the floorboards, a strange breeze in the hallway, it could be nothing, or it could be the plumbing, or it could be Zeke just checking in. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like to share something that's close to home, both literally and personally. Just a few blocks away from Lee William High School that I showed you in the beginning of this video, there's a park with a memorial. It honors 11 firefighters who lost their lives on July 5th, 1973, in what became known as the Kingman explosion or the Doxal disaster. That day, a propane tanker caught fire during a transfer operation. As the firefighters worked to contain it, the tank exploded with a catastrophic bleed, which is boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. The blast was so powerful, it sent debris flying over a quarter mile and was felt miles away. Among those who died was Richard Lee Williams, the principal of Kingman High School and a volunteer firefighter. He succumbed to his injuries 3 days later. Now I remember this vividly. Over 20 years ago, I was a young firefighter in EMT training. Here's my shirt. And they used this Doxal disaster that happened in Kingman as a case study for scene safety. And I'll tell you guys, when I heard this story and how close it was to home, it scared the crap out of me. And I kept this disaster in mind when responding to EMS and fire calls from then on. And not only that, but then when I became assistant fire chief and I started running trainings and I went out on emergency calls with the guys, this disaster had a huge impact on how we operated. It's a stark reminder that the ground we walk on holds stories of sacrifice and resilience. So as we've explored today, whether it's unmarked graves beneath our schools or the legacy of heroes commemorated in our parks, the past is always present, just beneath the surface. And it's up to us to honor it. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and hit the like button. It helps my channel. And subscribe. You never know what you're going to get from me. But even sometimes my own videos surprise me. So anyway, till next time, you guys all take care. And we'll catch you later. Bye.
Bewley, the kid.